All right, we're gonna continue with chapter 3. Let me get rid of this. We're gonna play Jeopardy on chapter 2 next Wednesday. We'll finish up chapter 3 next Monday, and the Monday after that we'll do Jeopardy on chapter 3. We talked about some basic financial ratios. Among those, the common size income, common size financial statements. We talked about short-term and long-term solvency ratios. What was your name? Warren? One thing we didn't talk about in terms of long-term solvency ratios, the so-called coverage ratios. I think my other one is gonna need batteries. The long-term solvency ratios we talked about were debt equity ratio, equity multiplier, and total debt ratio. They pretty much had the same information. It's just the different ways of looking at it. Coverage ratios looks at your ability to service debt. How much money are you making to cover your interest payments? If any of you guys ever applied for a mortgage, in addition to your credit score, one of the things they look at is something like debt to income ratio. You may have a credit score of 800, but if your debt to income ratio, when they say debt, is basically monthly payments you make on debts. If that's more than 40%, you're not going to qualify for a mortgage. Why? Because you're already spending 40% of your money on debt service. Obviously, you have to eat and other stuff. These ratios are similar. There are two of them that we're going to look at. One of them is times interest earned ratio, or if you like, we can abbreviate that as TIE. I don't even remember the definition, but hey, you can always look it up. It's so-called EBIT. This is earnings before interest and taxes. The reason we're looking at earnings before interest and taxes instead of net income or earnings itself, you make the interest payments before you pay any taxes. So before I have to worry about interest and taxes, is the firm making enough money or what is the extent to which they're making money to cover the interest. You want this ratio to be probably at least 2, and that's a rule of thumb. There is no hard and fast rule. It's 2 would be something like equivalent to 50% debt service to income ratio. The higher, the better. Another one we're going to talk about is cash coverage ratio. That's abbreviated as CCR. That's EBIT plus depreciation divided by interest, or EBITDA divided by interest. Remember, EBIT is earnings before interest and taxes. That means you have already deducted depreciation expenses, but depreciation expense is a non-cash expense. So cash coverage ratio basically makes a correction for that. Because depending upon the industry, certain firms have a lot of depreciation because of their nature, and certain firms don't. And to kind of make them equal, in fact, technically speaking, if I was doing for real analysis, I would add back any non-cash expense. For example, there's stock-based compensation. And this ratio should be obviously at least 1, but preferably higher than 2. Okay, somebody came in. What was your name? Last name? You're Moses, right? Okay. Remember the distinction. Things like debt equity ratio measures your amount of leverage. Basically, how many dollars of debt you're using per dollar of your own money, or at least in terms of book value. Coverage ratios is your ability to service that debt. So they're just looking at solvency from kind of 2 different viewpoints. One looks at the stock of debt, the other looks at your ability to service that debt. Now let's talk about these ratios. Look at I think we already, let's download financial statements of Kroger, and I may already have that. Let me check. Like that. Well, let's go ahead and download those. SEC.gov, Walmart. Just gonna get the 10K. Oh, apparently I already have it here. So I'm not gonna go ahead and okay. So that we can make our calculations here. Let's see. These ratios looks at